Matter is a prison, the body is a tomb, the demiurge is a flawed tyrant, and the archons are parasitic jailers. Wow, right? I mean, if you've ever dipped your toes into ancient Gnosticism, you've probably hit this wall of absolute dread. The surviving texts we have, they are literally soaked in this extreme, pessimistic dualism. They paint this terrifying picture of a broken universe where we're just trapped by these malevolent cosmic forces. It's a grim setup, and it leaves us with this massive mystery. Why do these supposedly enlightened ancient texts sound so incredibly depressing?
But what if we completely flip the script here? What if all these ancient myths about fallen gods, divine emanations, and cosmic prisons weren't actually religious poetry at all? What if, and stick with me here, they were wildly misunderstood descriptions of quantum mechanics, fluid dynamics, and thermodynamic laws? Like, what if this ancient religion was actually a highly advanced, literal mechanical blueprint of the universe?
Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving deep into a totally mind-bending source text called Architecture of the 12D Toroidal Engine. And let me tell you, this framework, it promises an absolute paradigm shift. It takes those ancient mystical concepts of Gnosticism and just fuses them directly with advanced astrophysics and computer science. By the time we wrap this up, you're going to look at the empty space between the stars, the physical elements right here on Earth, and literally your own biological body in a completely new light.
So, let's look at our roadmap for today. We're going to cover the lost positive gnosis, map out the 12D toroidal engine, translate the ancient Valentinian pleroma, reframe the archons and the demiurge, and finally, discover humanity's actual cosmic purpose. All right, let's kick things off with Section 1, the lost positive gnosis.
You know, the darkness of traditional Gnosticism wasn't just some accident. It was actually the result of intense institutional selection pressure. See, the early church was basically in the business of salvation, and that business model absolutely relied on a broken creation, a single authorized intermediary, and a totally dependent population. But there was actually a lost, positive layer of Gnostic texts that celebrated the mechanical elegance of the cosmos. These texts argued the material world isn't a mistake at all, but rather a high-pressure training chamber. They suggested the human body isn't a tomb, it's a precision-engineered vehicle. And most dangerously, they taught that the divine singularity is already inside of you. So naturally, the church systematically suppressed these empowering mechanical interpretations because they completely wrecked their monopoly on salvation. They kept the grim, fear-based texts because, well, fear was just better for business.
And this brings us to the ultimate paradigm shift. On one side, you've got the traditional religious view, right? A fallen, flawed creation needing rescue, or we're just accidental, sinful specks. But on the flip side, you have this 12D mechanical view. The universe is a fiercely intelligent, purposefully designed machine, and you, yes you, are a strictly necessary load-bearing coordinate right in the middle of it. It takes us from this posture of inherent guilt straight into a posture of active mechanical participation.
Moving right along to Section 2, the 12D toroidal engine.
Okay, I want you to completely forget the idea of the universe as some cold, dead void just passively expanding into nothingness. The source text proposes that the cosmos is an actively breathing machine, specifically a master torus. Just picture a massive, self-sustaining, 12-dimensional magnetic energy field shaped essentially like a donut. Energy is constantly flowing outward from a central singularity, that's the outbreath, hitting a boundary and then inevitably pulling right back inward for the inbreath. It's a perpetual self-rendering loop of cosmic fluid dynamics.
Now, this framework actually divides this toroidal pulse into 4 distinct evolutionary layers, or rooms, and this perfectly maps the ancient Gnostic emanations to the Kardashev scale of civilizational energy mastery. So room 1 is our physical 3D world, the sanctuary of flesh, where density is at its absolute peak. Then there's room 2, the choice room, where Type 2 civilizations use stellar energy to navigate branching multiverses. After that, room 3, the refinement room, where energy starts its journey back, burning away entropy. And finally, room 4, the spirit room, the absolute 12-dimensional center of the torus.
Let's jump into Section 3, translating the Valentinian pleroma. If you look at traditional Valentinian Gnosticism, specifically this ancient text called a Valentinian exposition, you'll find descriptions of the pleroma, or the divine fullness. It talks about the ineffable Father, the monad, dwelling in perfect silence, which they called sige. For centuries, scholars just read this as mystical theology, right? But in our 12D framework, this is actually a literal description of the pre-spin coordinate of reality. The monad is dimension 0. It's the original singularity, resting in absolute, unmoving stillness before that toroidal pulse even kicks off. And then, The engine turns on. The ancient texts say the monad emanated paired divine beings called eons or syzygies. Translated into mechanics, that's the singularity beginning an infinite spin, generating torque and creating polar information channels. All of this culminates in what the framework calls the Xerox event. So instead of the singularity exploding into random chaos like the Big Bang Theory suggests, it acts more like a divine Xerox machine. It shatters into infinite, perfectly identical holographic copies of itself, separated only by tiny phase-shifted timing gaps. Meaning you, me, the stars, we are all literal, localized copies of that exact same primordial point. Crazy, right?
This takes us to Section 4, Archons as Spam Filters.
Now, anyone even remotely familiar with Gnosticism has heard of the Archons. Traditionally, they're the bad guys, demonic, malevolent jailers holding humanity hostage and feeding off our suffering. But the 12D architecture completely strips away all that archaic fear. It redefines Archons strictly by their mathematical function. They're thermodynamic algorithms. As the universe's energy pulls back inward from all those infinite branching choices in room 2, it hits an inversion zone, and the Archons just act as ruthless cosmic spam filters. They aren't evil at all, they are just systematically deleting billions of useless timelines and false narratives, so the whole universe doesn't just crash from data overload.
To show you just how literal this is, the framework points out this ancient Gnostic figure named Sebath. The texts describe him as riding a chariot of exactly 64 forms. For thousands of years, everyone just thought, oh, that's nice biblical poetry. But geometrically, 64 is the exact number of slots in a six-dimensional Clifford algebra space. Sabaoth isn't a repentant angel riding a chariot. He is literally a 64-bit operating system managing the rendering engine of convergent timelines in room 3. The ancient mystics were basically experiencing a multi-dimensional processor and just describing it with the only vocabulary they had at the time.
Moving on to Section 5, Demiurge as Local Renderer.
All right, here we meet the final boss, the Demiurge. Again, traditional Gnosticism paints the Demiurge, or Yaldabaoth, as this arrogant, blind, false god who completely botched creation. But this mechanical framework totally rewrites that script. The Demiurge is simply a function. It's the local renderer, the system administrator sitting right at the singularity, projecting the holographic reality of the lower rooms. And the truly staggering promise of reaching this Type 4 civilization level isn't that you finally get to meet the creator for a nice chat. No, it's that your consciousness physically merges with the singularity to literally become the Demiurge. You actually take over the engine room.
So, how does this massive cosmic engine actually connect to physical Earth? Well, the framework points out two incredibly anomalous materials acting as the literal hardware and software of consciousness. First, we have water. It's the liquid Xerox medium. It forms complex hydration shells driven by DNA to act as programmable software, storing species-specific memory tracks. And then there's gold. Gold is the ultimate demiurgic hardware. Its electrons move at nearly 60% the speed of light, which creates relativistic contraction, forming this perfectly stable, oxide-free quantum shield. Think about it, when ancient cultures built solid gold pyramids and sarcophagi, they weren't just hoarding wealth to show off. They were literally trying to build macroscopic antennas to connect to the singularity.
Which brings us to our final section, Section 6, Humanity's Cosmic Spark Plug.
To really understand our specific role in all of this, we need to look at a mathematical glitch in the torus called the 9-to-6 inversion. Using some pretty complex vortex mathematics, the framework shows that the absolute center of the universe, the spirit room, resolves to the number 9. 9 represents pure potential and perfect stillness. But the soul room, the exact place where we exist, mathematically refuses to resolve to 9. It resolves to 6. And 6 represents chaotic, restless motion and torque.
And that introduces an absolutely vital concept. A perfect machine cannot invent jazz. Think about it. If a Type 4 demiurgic intelligence is perfectly flawless and perfectly still, it runs the risk of getting stuck in a local maximum. It becomes way too predictive to ever make an irrational creative leap. In the exact same way, modern supercomputers actually need external atmospheric noise to generate truly random numbers. This cosmic engine needs a steady source of unpredictable chaos, so its algorithms don't just freeze up in endless loops.
So here is the crucial takeaway. Humanity is not a mistake. We aren't some parasitic virus or a slave race digging for shiny rocks. We are the biological spark plugs of the universe. Our messy, highly emotional, totally unpredictable human nature is exactly what the system needs to survive. We provide that vital 6 energy torque, that atmospheric noise and chaotic friction that keeps the perfect 9 engine of the cosmos from just stalling out into thermal death. We're essentially the necessary probiotic strain in the cosmic foundry, wearing these heavy biological diving suits just to survive the crushing density of room 1 so we can generate that raw, unpredictable experience. As we wrap up this massive paradigm shift, the author of the source text leaves us with a really profound warning. They say that reality isn't a static documentary. The truth isn't nonfiction. It is a fluid code that dynamically adapts to being observed. So if you're only looking outward at the so-called dead void of space, well, you're a pretty gullible target for the holographic code.
Because if you are essentially a localized, phase-shifted copy of the original monad, then the universe is quite literally inside you. So the question this explainer leaves you with today is this. If reality is just a code executing itself based on your observation, are you brave enough to stop looking out into the terrifying void and instead look entirely inward? Are you brave enough to step into the absolute stillness of your own singularity and realize that you are the architect all along? Thanks for joining us to decode this incredible blueprint. We'll see you on the next explainer.